I'm so glad you've joined us today for another study of the names of God. So today we have our work cut out for us because this week we have not one, not two, but 5 different names that are given to God in the scriptures. Now, even though those names are often used together or even interchangeably, depending on what translation, there might be a translation that says God is our refuge. There might be a translation that says God is our dwelling place, and they're used interchangeably. However, I think each of these names gives us a different picture of who God is to us. So I do want to explore each name on its own a little bit. So before we begin, our lesson focused on Psalm 91, talking about the safety that we have when we dwell with God and when we are under the shadow of his wings. But what I want us to recognize is that actually Psalm 90 is specifically paired with Psalm 91. Now, if you were to go back and read Psalm 90, which we don't have time for today, but I encourage you to do it on your own. Psalm 90 is a psalm that Moses wrote, and he's talking a lot about the sinful state of man and what can we do apart from God, and our life is but a breath, and all these things about the wrath of God coming because of our sin. And Psalm 91 is specifically put behind Psalm 90 as an encouragement. So here's the condition of man, our sinful, frail human condition. And here's the antidote: to dwell under the shadow of the Almighty, that he will guard us and protect us, that is a life of flourishing instead. Now, we don't know who wrote Psalm 91. Some people think it was Moses. But either way, seeing those Psalms together really shows us the intent of our condition without the Lord, and then what it looks like when we're dwelling with him. So we're going to dive into each name here and just spend a brief amount of time looking at what each one means and how that affects our relationship with the Lord. So dwelling place is this idea of home. Now, I don't know what ideas home conjures up for you, but regardless, it's a place of familiarity. It's a place of belonging. It is where you have your things, where you know where to find things, where you've set it up the way that you like it. It's the place that you come back to after work, after church, after a vacation. It is where you are grounded. It's where your foundation is. And if you may have moved around a lot, you may have been in the same home for many years. So if you've ever had the experience of changing homes, sometimes it takes a little bit to have the place feel like home. My parents have actually moved around quite a bit in my adult life, but every house they've ever been in feels like home because it's where my parents live, and it's comfortable and it's familiar, and I'm free to go to the fridge or the pantry and I know what I'm going to find there. So a sense of home can be that familiar place where you know you belong. Now in Psalm 90 that we just said Moses wrote, in verse 1, it says, "Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations." The significance of Moses writing this is Moses did not have a permanent home. He went from a Hebrew family to being adopted into Pharaoh's home, to fleeing to Midian, to wandering in the wilderness. Moses knows a thing or two about not having a permanent people or a home. So for him to say that God is our dwelling place forever is significant. It's that sense of no matter what, that God is our dwelling place. That no matter the people, the place, God is our fixed address for all time and eternity. So we remember that God is our eternal home. Refuge. When we think about a refuge, we think about a place that feels safe, comfortable, secure. It might be different even than a dwelling because maybe it has more of a comforting, tucked in feeling. In my own home, a place of refuge for me is my bed. Because sometimes, maybe on a Saturday morning, if my kids are watching shows, I can be in my bed with my Bible and a cup of coffee or a book, and I feel like I'm tucked away a little bit from the chaos, from whatever's going on, or even before bed at night to go to bed and read. It feels like a refuge because I feel tucked in, comforted, secure. However, it's so easy for us to take refuge in other things, to find comfort elsewhere. Isaiah 28:15 says this, "You boast, we have entered into a covenant with death. With the realm of the dead, we have made an agreement. When an overwhelming scourge sweeps by, it cannot touch us, for we have made a lie our refuge and falsehood our hiding place. What it's saying is they were putting their hope in the wrong things, and their refuge was a lie. Their hiding place was not going to deliver the way that they thought it was. So, and then when we see in Psalm 46, where we see God is our refuge and strength, no matter what happens, though the earth gives way, the mountains fall, that's a refuge that does not change, that will not fail us. Our earthly refuges will fail us, and all other refuges are a lie. Now we come to shield. This is kind of our first one that brings up the image of battle, of some sort of a war, right? Where you need a defense. Now, a shield in biblical times could be small and handheld. It could be big enough to cover the entire body. They were used obviously in battle. They could also be used to shield you from the heat in the middle of the day. They could be slept under as a shelter at night. So a shield really was just a covering. It was a protection, but also just a covering for the person. So what I love where shield is used first here in the Bible is Genesis 15:1. After this, and this is after Abram had been in a significant battle. So after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram, I am your shield, your very great reward. God is saying, I'm your protection. I will stick up for you. I will cover you. I am the shield that you need. We have an enemy and we need protection. A soldier would never go into battle without a shield or some sort of armor for protection, but we often leave ourselves open to attack. Because whether we do it consciously or unconsciously, the habits that we do or the things that we do in our lives can often leave us vulnerable. Whether it's not spending enough time in God's word, not getting enough sleep or eating the right foods, letting a conflict with someone linger, so many of those things, extra amounts of stress, those are all things that leave us vulnerable to an attack. We have not lifted up the shield of the Lord to keep us from the enemy's lies and the enemy's attacks. So we want to remember, don't leave yourself vulnerable to attack. Then we come to fortress. This is one of those words, again, that kind of reminds us of battle or of war, but it conjures up this image of might and of strength. If you were to just look at a picture of a fortress, you would see something that looks formidable. It's something that you don't think you can get through, right? It's tall, it's built of stone, it's thick, it's huge. That's the whole idea, right? That you can't get past the fortress. So when we think of God as our fortress, and he is the one that's surrounding us with brick and stone and height and depth, no one can get past that to get to us through God, that he has that protection for us. One of my favorite verses of the Bible is Psalm 62, verses 1 and 2, where it says, my soul finds rest in God alone. My salvation comes from him. He alone is my rock and my fortress. I will never be shaken. And so I love this picture of not being shaken. If we are in a fortress, we are immovable. And so we want to live a life that is immovable. Then we come to the idea of a strong tower. This is kind of similar to a fortress, except it's a little bit more of the idea of like a watchtower, a high place where you can see a lot, you can see what's going on. You could probably see the enemy coming before they get there. If you're in the tower, you can see what's going on. One of the verses I love that goes with this word is Proverbs 18:10. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. Some places say a fortified tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. This kind of brings us back to the heart of this whole study, that the name of the Lord, we've talked about how the name of the Lord is the sum of his character. The name of the Lord, his character is our strong tower. That when we trust in all of who God is, we are in this tower, this watch place where we can see what's going on, and we're lifted up and away from the enemy and what is going on. It brings safety. But what I love about this verse is that the righteous run to it. There's a sense of urgency here. And what I want for us to think about is, are we running to the tower of the Lord? And not just in the moment of our dire need. Because if I'm waiting for the enemy to come before I start running to the tower, I'm in big trouble. If I'm in that tower when the onslaught comes, I've got a much better chance. And so we want to run to that tower every day, not just when the enemy comes, not just when challenges come, but every day, so that when battle does come, we're in the tower, safe and ready. So God's character, his name, should cause us to want to run to him regularly. So just a few applications as we look at what we've just talked about. Like, what does that mean to have all of these words in God's character and who he is to us? So the first thing I want us to remember is that there's no promise that we will escape our circumstances, only the promise that our life is guarded by God. Notice even in Psalm 91, it doesn't talk about there's no more arrows, there's no more enemy. It says, when those things come, you will be safe in God's care. Psalm 27:5 says, for he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. It does not say there won't be trouble. And then of course in John 16:33, when Jesus says, in this world, you will have trouble. God isn't promising us that we won't have hard circumstances. He's not saying if we come under the shadow of his wings, if we make him our shield and our refuge, we won't have any issues, no problems. It just means we're guarded and protected in a unique way, that really those things can't penetrate us, that we can still have a sense of peace or of joy, that those things can't harm us the same way that they can if we're not under God's loving care, that God protects us in the midst of pain and suffering. The second thing is that experiencing God in these ways are all dependent on proximity. Here's what I mean by that. I can't use a shield that is across the battlefield from me. I have to be hanging on to it. It needs to be next to me for it to do any good. A fortress on the other side of the country won't help me. I have to be in it. I have to be in the fortress for it to protect me. So if I'm going to depend on God to be my shield, my strong tower, I have to be close to him. It's all dependent on proximity. So one of my sons has some issues with anxiety, and one of the things he's been struggling with the last many months is sleeping at night. And so for many months he's been getting up during the night. And so for a long time I would go to bed with him, or for a long time he would come sleep on the floor in my room. And a couple of weeks ago, he asked his brother to sleep in his bed with him. Mind you, it's a twin bed. And his brother slept in his bed with him. And that was the first night in months that he slept through the whole night, because he had proximity. Now here's the thing I want us to know about this. Proximity changes our perspective, because the circumstances had not changed. There was still noises in the night. There's still darkness. He's in the same bed, the same room, the same house. None of those things had changed from the night before, except for the fact that there was proximity. There was someone in his bed with him, and he suddenly felt safe and secure. So proximity changes our perspective of what's going on. When we are close to the Lord, then all of a sudden our circumstances look different. They look more manageable. They look like something we can handle. They look like something that we know the Lord is protecting us against. So the final thing here is that the key is to abide. This circles us back to our first name of God as our dwelling place. If God is truly our dwelling place, if we are making our home with him and staying with him, not just here and there, because you're not home just here and there. That's a place you go every day. That if God is our home, our daily home, and as we abide with him and stay close to him, all these other things happen as a result. He's our refuge. He's our shield, our fortress, our strong tower. Jesus reminded his disciples that in John 15:4. He says, remain in me, stay with me, and I will remain in you. There's this beautiful back and forth picture that as we dwell with God, as we stay with God, that he stays with us and he's dwelling in us. In Ephesians 2:22, it says, in him, you two are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives. This beautiful picture that as we stay with him, he actually indwells us as well. So when we make the Lord our dwelling place, everything else falls into place. When he's our home and we stay close to him, we have great protection. We have peace, confidence, rest. So may you make the Lord your dwelling place, your daily, hourly, moment by moment dwelling place, so that he might also find his home in you and you experience the beauty of his loving care. God bless you.